Now let's see if one way would be to introduce or, attract more youth into the agricultural space. Perhaps that would be the answer to it. We'll discuss youth skills development now with Rosemary Chikoya. She's the executive director of Ladi Memorial Foundation. She's also the coordinator of National Sewing Championship. Thank you so much, Ms. Oshikoya, for your time. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon and happy World Youth Skills Day 2024 today.
We wish you the same. And we're just wondering if perhaps if we had more youths in the agricultural sector, we would be talking less about food insecurity in the country. What's your take on this, especially since you're having to deal with a lot of youths in recent times?
The basic need of man is food, clothing, and shelter, like we said. And just like you rightly said, we can have no life if we do not have food. And so getting everybody involved in the value chain for agriculture is really very important at this time. Because if we all have to eat, then we need to find strategies and innovative ways of making that sector very attractive for everybody. And what more topical day than today that is the World Youth Skills Day. Nigeria has a predominant population of young adults. We know the statistics already. And then the question now is, if Nigeria has more of the adults, young adult population, how much of that segment of our population is contributing to feeding everybody? They have the most of the strength, they have the vigor, they have more of the education, you would want to say at that time, because we're talking of the Z generation, we're talking of the X generation, and all of them lump into that. And a lot of them expectedly by the Nigerian policy of education should be in school. So if everybody is in school and school farms are working and we have more of agric entrepreneurs from that level and from that class, then like every other country in the world, we should have no food problems. And if we are still having food problems, then we need to go back again and rethink again what are the ways we need to get more hands into agriculture, how much more of the technology and the space we have for agriculture do we need to revamp. And that would be where we should focus more of our attention as a country and as a people.
Yeah, so I mean, we've heard about tweaking the curriculum to put in more skills acquisition subjects and courses and all of that, but it does seem like when it comes to theory, we may have it right there, but the practice of it, perhaps even the tools to practice and all of that, it seems that we haven't gotten there yet.
I would like to agree with you in that regard, so to speak, because the critique from all of us and the critique from most of the stakeholders is the fact that there's been more of theoretical learning alternative to practical. But I think the reality we have in Nigeria now, we need to focus more attention on the practical. For instance, how does school farm start? I remember when I was in school, I wouldn't remember if that was common with you, but at that time, every space within the school compound is supposed to have school farm. And at certain points, each individual student is required to cultivate a portion of land, grow that, and stories who are bound from generations before mine will tell you how school communities are able to produce enough staple food to take care of themselves and also augment. We have moved away from that one. I think for me, the question now is how do we get back there? And getting back there means that it's going to be a lot more cost intensive. But I think if we want to get to improve more on the practical side of skills in school, we will need to see more significant investments in school infrastructure, technical, vocational structures as you have that. A lot of videos have been making around in the social media. You've seen a couple of them and many Nigerians have. You will find that an average school outside Nigeria spend a lot more time, students at every level, including primary school, having opportunity to do things with their hands. In education, you would say that is motor skills, that you need to connect the hands, the brain, and the mind of the individual to all function at the same pace. But if the child, from the time the child commences education, say from the mother's home, you do not do things that has to connect your mind, your brain, your sense, and all of that together in one space, the child gets to think that all of us have to just grow up and all we just need to do is to push pen. And that is a bit of the challenge we have. And I think if you ask me, that has to be something that all stakeholders will have to pay attention to. It has to be that everybody takes their pocket. Look at the school buildings as we have them today. School buildings are basically just some empty classrooms that possibly do not even have chairs for children to sit down. And so when we talk about skills in that regard, a lot of our attention gets focused on literacy skills and we get into curriculum development. But from our investigation so far, if you take a close look at that, you would find that even when some elements of skills are there in the curriculum, they appear to be some semblance of checklist item and not really cultivated at what practical outcome do you have. Let me give you an example. Nigerian curriculum says before a child leaves school, at junior secondary school, the child should have functional livelihood skill. That is what basic education equips the child for. And by that argument, you expect that the child who would leave junior secondary school at the age of 15 could function in Nigerian society as an artisan. That child could be a bricklayer, the child could be a tailor, the child could be a baker. But in real sense, we find that there's a mismatch between that. So rather than begin to argue just on curriculum alone, which becomes another debate of developing curriculum and then there's no end to developing that, there is already trade curriculum standards that are available in Nigeria. MNEC has a couple of them. Under the National Skill Qualification Framework, we see NBTE has those across the sector. So why not we move a leap from talking about curriculum to actually talking about implementation of those skill standards we have? And talking about the access that are available, speaking of agri skills. In terms of agri skills, how many schools in Nigeria have school farm? How many students in school? Because agriculture is mandatory when a child is in basic education. Check the curriculum. But that curriculum aspect that is there, do we require that the child is trade certified? That their minimum benchmark we expect the child should have in terms of practical outcome. So I think curriculum is not as much of the problem as much as applying them and setting out of the box criteria that says you have to get certified. You have to have cutting edge skills. For instance, Bangladesh. You don't really have to go to school in the formal sense of it, but then that country seems to produce more of the garment that the whole of the world seems to use. If we go to London to shop, and most of the clothes are produced in Bangladesh, the tailors sit in their homes in small circles. Informal skill centers are contributing so much to that multi-trillion-dollar sector you call garments making in Nigeria. And if it is compulsory that our children in school also are required to have that competency, even at basic and junior secondary school, then we'll have to shift the conversation to say, possibly it's how are we contributing to the economy? How viable are the schools in terms of, if we see the schools as investments where every learner is an apprentice, and when government puts the structure for skill centers in every of those school students, as we have experimented in some of the pilots we have done as organization, we would see that we are actually ready for that. So I think we have to move at this point of our development from means and hope and dreams to means and ways of how do we actually get everybody farming? How do you get every child producing? Then you have to incentivize the process and make it more attractive for them to get into the skills we are talking about.
All right, Mr. Oshikoya. Mr. Oshikoya, so let me just help us. Because in this day and age, I know you did say when we were growing up, of course, we had farms and things like that. But, the trends seem to have evolved. So now it is ICT. You see, every child can operate a tab, a laptop and everything. So how do you balance that with these survival skills you're talking about in reality?
I will take you to one of the conversations we had about Finland some years ago. Finland was topping the world chart about being the best country, so to speak, education. And you will find that for most of these countries we sort of applaud, the children are very good in skills, yes. They are very good in computer and the rest of them. But at the same time, education is also fashioned in such a way that the fact that the child is going to play with the computer does not mean the child will not spend time in nature and learning about plants. And these countries we're also talking about who champion having multimedia and all of that for education is still the same country that still require that each child go through, as part of the mandatory condition for you graduating, a child has to do a practical project. Take, for instance, we talk about prom so much in Europe and America and the rest of them. But you've seen most often than not that the girl who is going to attend prom, some of them actually construct the garments themselves. So this multi-track education that is not just theoretical is what we are saying, ma. For instance, in school, a child in basic education, let me start from there, because when I get into secondary education, you expect that the developmental milestone of that child had come to the point where the child is already more matured and is able to handle more of those competencies we are saying. But at basic education, how do you incentivize a child? Because again, basic education is where the decision of what career path the child will go to comes in. When the child leaves junior secondary school, the decision of whether he goes to humanities, whether he goes to the core technical, or he just wants to do any of the any of the other skills area is decided when the child is in basic education. So if that child is in school, and the average school, again, to put that in context, the average school student in Nigeria, out of our population of 210, and the percentage that is for that, most Nigerian average child have not touched a computer. And you could take that in the census of, take a census of most of the public schools around you. So since we know most of our children are in those public schools, so public schools that do not have school structures and do not have workshops and do not have anything whatsoever other than the bench, and sometimes the bench do not exist, certainly would not do that. But you see, if we face the arguments on whether the child is able to read or write, and we don't say, well, if you're not cut out and maybe we have issues with education, the child could also do well in skills. So why don't we give the child a dual education of a sort?
All right.
Because if you look at most of the census now, Nigeria has a population of over 40 million children out of school. The data keep changing, so we don't know which is correct as at present. But of these schools, and very recently we have the Almajire Commission, and we talk about all the reasons why the children are out of school. But what if we shift this conversation into skills? What can you do with your hands?
So
And
I
then we do
think
not then require that
I
we are
will-
benchmarking the standard of a child based on whether you can read and write, but how much of the children could be able to do most of those talents we need to find around us.
All
For
right, Mr.
instance, how
Shikaya.
many of our children needs to be given opportunity?
All right, Mr. Shikoya, I must tell you, I am reluctant to stop this, but it's time, and it's live TV. We do have other segments. And I do believe with this passion you have exhibited as an NGO, that you would also push the frontiers to try to. I know one of that obviously is your sewing competition, or that's you're planning as a way of instilling skills on the youth, and we do wish you the best, and we'll certainly invite you back to the program, or one of our programs, to discuss your progress in this area. Thank you so much for your time, Mr. Shikoya.
Thank you for the opportunity to engage issues on the World Youth Skills Day today. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.